The 1930s marked the rise of totalitarian regimes in the Soviet Union, Germany, and Italy. Totalitarianism is a single-party form of government emerging after World War I, in which the ruling political party seeks to control all parts of the social, cultural, economic, and political lives of the population, typically making use of mass communication and violence to instill its ideology and maintain power. Meanwhile, Japanese leaders suggested that overseas conquest was the solution to the Depression. Politicians used racism to mobilize the people. The Japanese believed the Koreans and Chinese were inferior, and Germans used Jews as scapegoats and viewed them as enemies. Stalin succeeded Lenin in 1929, creating a change in the predominantly agricultural society into an industrial powerhouse. Stalin replaced Lenin's policy with the installment of 5-year plans to help mobilize the nation. However, this was at the cost of individual freedom and millions of lives. Stalin also established central economic planning, a policy of government direction of the economy. Both of these allowed the Soviet Union to become a leading industrial nation and one able to contend in a world war. Farmers, who refused to give in to the new communist system, were attacked while new elite classes dominated the working class. Collective farming led to mass starvation as the grain harvests decreased from 83 million to 67 million tons, and Stalin blamed the enemies of communism. Stalin instituted purges, or state-approved violence, including widespread arrests, labor camps, and executions. Former Bolsheviks and military leaders were executed in the thousands. An estimated million people died every year from the harsh conditions of gulags that stretched from Moscow to Serbia. The Great Depression hit Japan as it was recovering from an earthquake that killed 140,000 people. In 1925, men over the age of 25 voted Emperor Hirohito into power. The military, along with politicians who supported more representative government, gained power over the liberal faction. The military leaders believed the solution to the Depression would be to conquer nearby land to provide fresh farmland for the Japanese people and a larger pool of customers for business people. Hirohito and his advisors built great support for a militaristic imperial system. This new military spirit also garnered Japanese claim of racial superiority to Koreans and Chinese. In September 1931, the Japanese military blew up a Japanese-owned train in Manchuria, but made it look like a Chinese attack by placing corpses dressed as Chinese troops. They used this as an excuse to occupy Manchuria, set up a puppet government, and invade further into China. China appealed to the League of Nations, and aside from condemning the act, they did nothing to help. In 1934, Chiang Kai-shek implemented the New Life movement that was meant to militarize the people and have them ready to sacrifice for the nation at all times. Chiang Kai-shek believed China's true enemy was the Chinese Communist Party, but was forced to join forces with them to fight against Japan. After failing an attempted coup, Hitler spent 9 months in prison where he was able to write Mein Kampf. In this book, he spoke of scientific anti-Semitism and the idea of the Aryan race. The Great Depression hit Germany hard, and the Nazi Party took advantage, managing to win 33% of the Reichstag, a tremendous increase from their previous 2.6% before the stock market crash. The idealistic youth, along with the white-collar and lower-middle class, believed Germany would only be restored if Hitler was in power. He was a charismatic speaker, so much so that when he was made chancellor, millions celebrated and even wept in joy. Hitler forcibly shut down representative government, suspended civil rights, censored the press, and stopped political parties from meeting. Hitler's private army, the stormtroopers, harassed all opponents of the Nazi Party. The Enabling Act of 1933 suspended the Constitution and allowed Nazi laws to be passed automatically. Hitler instituted public works programs to combat unemployment, and it largely worked, and people believed he was some kind of miracle, even though women were paid less for the same work. The elite SS, or Gestapo, forced complete compliance to the Nazis and rounded up Jews, communists, homosexuals, and any opponent and imprisoned them in concentration camps. Hitler blamed the Jews for Germany's loss in World War I and the economic crisis. He labeled them vermin that needed to be eliminated. The Nuremberg Laws of 1935 took away citizenship of Jews and prohibited marriage for Jews and other Germans. November 9th to the 10th, 1938 became known as the Night of Broken Glass, where Nazis attacked synagogues, Jewish stores, and threw more than 20,000 Jews in prison camps. Meanwhile, the United States was still in the midst of the Depression. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected in 1932, and with him came a torrent of new legislation in his first 100 days. He promised the people a New Deal, giving relief for businesses, public works programs for the unemployed, and aid for struggling farmers. The Social Security Act of 1935 set up a fund, paid by employees and employers alike, to provide retirement and other benefits for citizens. Roosevelt took advantage of new technology such as radio and regular fireside chats that were meant to rally the people behind democracy. Hitler's agenda included gaining more Lebensraum, or living space, that would be taken from inferior peoples. In 1935, Hitler renounced the Treaty of Versailles and began rearming the nation. In the same year, Mussolini began his invasion of Ethiopia. The League of Nations condemned this action and voted to impose sanctions on Italy, proving again the League of Nations would do nothing to stop the aggression of the future Axis powers. In 1936, Hitler began remilitarizing the Rhineland on the border with France. Hitler aimed to expand his territory and begun by annexing Austria, also known as the Anschluss. German troops built factories to combat unemployment, and Hitler reminded them that they were once part of a great empire. Hitler then set his eyes on Czechoslovakia. In the fall of 1938, the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, the French Premier Edouard Daladier, and Mussolini met with Hitler in Munich, Germany, and agreed to give him the Sudetenland. Hitler promised this would be his last territorial claim, and Chamberlain was happy to give it to him as an appeasement, and declared he had achieved peace in our time. Appeasement failed. Hitler invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia in 1939. While this was going on in Europe, Japan had already begun fighting with China in 1937. Japan took Shanghai, Nanjing, and other coastal cities, claiming to liberate them from Western imperialism. In 1938, Japan declared the Great East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere that would help liberate Asians from the oppressive white race, when in reality Japan treated the other countries terribly. On September 1st, 1939, Germany began its invasion of Poland, forcing Britain and France to declare war on Germany. A week before the invasion, Germany signed the Nazi-Soviet pact with the USSR, basically agreeing not to go to war with each other and that they would invade Poland from both sides. The Germans used blitzkrieg, or lightning warfare, that involved deep, fast attacks with tanks and planes, followed by foot soldiers to secure the area. The Soviet Union invaded Poland from the east, and a month after the German invasion, Poland fell. At the same time, the US had not joined the war, but Hungarian Jewish nuclear physicists backed by Albert Einstein warned the government of possible weapons of mass destruction that could be created in Germany. After a letter to FDR, he approved the creation of the top-secret Manhattan Project to beat the Germans to the new technology. France was confident in its Maginot Line defense against Germany, believing it could not be penetrated and that they would attack through central Belgium as they did in World War I. In reality, Germany planned a surprise attack through the Ardennes in southeastern Belgium and Luxembourg, and quickly broke through the French defense and advanced to the coast. Over 300,000 British and French troops were cornered at Dunkirk, and only Hitler's poor judgment and a foggy day allowed British commercial, fishing, and military ships in the English Channel to evacuate almost all the troops safely to England. It took only 6 weeks for Germany to defeat France in the Low Countries. On June 14, 1940, German troops captured Paris, and on June 22, Germany and France signed an armistice, allowing Germany to control northern France and created the puppet state of Vichy France. During this time, Stalin annexed Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Winston Churchill became Prime Minister in May of 1940 and rallied the people to protect liberty with their blood, toil, tears, and sweat. Hitler planned an invasion of Britain called Operation Sea Lion, thus begun the Battle of Britain, where the Luftwaffe bombed houses, businesses, factories, harbors, and weapon depots. Britain's superior air force and anti-air weapons forced Hitler to abandon his mission to take the island. In June of 1941, Hitler broke the Nazi-Soviet pact and staged a full-on assault of the USSR called Operation Barbarossa. The first few months of the assault were very successful, with German troops killing 4.5 million on the border alone, and forced Soviet troops to use the scorched earth policy. Hitler's indecisive planning and the frigid conditions of Russian winter would halt the German advance just miles from Moscow. Japan quickly gobbled up British and French colonies in the Asian Pacific, and the United States stopped supplying Japan with essential industrial goods. In December 1941, Japan attempted to dissuade the U.S. from entering the war by attacking them at Pearl Harbor, killing over 2,000 people. Japan had woken the sleeping giant, with FDR and Congress declaring war on Japan the next day. Germany and Italy would follow its ally Japan and declare war on the U.S. Although FDR and Churchill distrusted Stalin, they came together to form the Allies to fight against the Axis of Germany, Italy, and Japan. Allied forces managed to push Rommel out of Africa, allowing troops to advance to Italy through Sicily. After years of fighting, Allied forces finally triumphed on the Italian peninsula, and Mussolini was shot and hung by partisans after Italy's liberation. German troops' failure to capture Stalingrad became a turning point in the war and marked the beginning of the Soviet march toward Germany. June 6, 1944, was known as D-Day, when Allied forces landed on the heavily fortified beaches of Normandy in France. While these troops fought through western France and liberated Paris, Soviet troops captured Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, and Poland. The Soviet army reached Berlin first, and on April 22, 1945, the Red Army began its attack on the city. On April 30th, rather than being captured, Hitler killed himself, and a week later, Germany surrendered. By 1942, Japan had taken major losses to the Allies in the battles of Midway Island and Guadalcanal, and the war in the Pacific reached its turning point. Unlike the Allies, they lacked the manpower and industry to recuperate its navy. The Allies jumped from island to island, cutting off Japanese supply lines. A final invasion of the Japanese mainland was planned, but before it was executed, the atom bomb was completed. New U.S. President Harry Truman made a decision that is still debated today. On August 6, 1945, the U.S. unleashed its atomic weapon on the city of Hiroshima. Imperial Japan refused surrender still, so another bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. These two bombs killed a combined 140,000 people, including tens of thousands of people who would die in the later days. Japan finally surrendered on August 15, 1945. It is said that World War II was won with British intelligence, American steel, and Russian blood.